Welcome to 2819. I'm Sandra Dimas.
And I'm Brian Rohmbacher.
And we have a spooky show for you today.
Yeah, it's a little spooky.
Yeah, a little spooky.
In RTV 101, Chris will be speaking with RTV visiting scholar and philosopher Mark Perez as they discuss the dilemma of creation versus evolution.
Oh, that's such a common dilemma that we have to choose either or. So that'll be a good conversation. In Give and Take, Jeff Swerenk will be talking with astronomer Hugh Ross about the question of Earth's extraordinary water. It is pretty
yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
First up is Culture Talk, where things are going to get a little spooky. Sandra will be speaking with philosopher Ken Samples as they discuss, should Christians celebrate Halloween? Let's check it out.
Welcome to Culture Talk. This is the segment where we talk about culturally relevant topics that you can use to start conversations about your faith. I'm joined today with philosopher and theologian Kenneth Samples. Thank you, Ken, for joining us.
Glad to be with you.
We're going to be talking about a topic that you've written about and one that I'm pretty excited to talk about, and that is about Halloween. Should Christians celebrate Halloween? So let's really just dive in. A big concern that some Christians have is that Halloween is connected to some form of paganism. And so that's the concern, is that they don't want to be involved in anything that originated from paganism.
Yeah, well, like a lot of holidays, including Christmas and Easter, the dates of some of these Christian holidays also overlap with days that were considered, for example, pagan festivals. So around October 31st, maybe before or on or after, there was an ancient Celtic festival that was called, I think the pronunciation is Samhain, and it was kind of the end of harvest, the beginning of winter, kind of the cycle of life and death. And that day was, of course, dedicated to the pagan gods. Well, October 31st overlaps with that. And so some people would say that that pagan holiday has been passed on to us today.
So with regard to kind of the origin of Halloween, or the pagan origin, and now what we have today is October 31st, Halloween, there's that concern that there are some rituals attached with
right.
the holiday for Halloween, like the cutting of jack-o'-lanterns and such. So how would you respond to concerns about engaging in things that, with our intent behind it, it's innocent. Our intent to give out or receive candy is innocent, but it's tied to pagan origin?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, I think that you need to realize that Halloween was also influenced by Christian holidays. For example, the name Halloween is derived from All Hallows Eve, the night before All Saints' Day. So there is kind of a mixing of both pagan influence with Christian influence. The other thing that I would say, however, is you have to be very careful logically that you don't evaluate something totally in terms of its origin, because things change, they develop, they move forward. And so many of the practices that contemporary people today, like sending their kids out in spooky outfits and collecting candy, it's probably very different in orientation than the way, some pagan festivals would be. So I think you have to you want to think really clearly and carefully in drawing some of these logical distinctions.
You brought up the origin issue and being careful to not attach how we celebrate holidays today to their origin. Wouldn't that be the case then for holidays like Christmas and Easter that also have pagan origins, but we celebrate them under the Christian perspective and from a Christian worldview?
Yeah, I think so. And I actually think the ancient and medieval church had very good insight. They realized that they lived in a part of the world that had been influenced by non-Christian thinking, pagan thinking, if you will. And they would often take these days that were known to be days of pagan celebration, and they would try to turn them toward a a spiritual commitment. So instead of celebrating pagan ideas, they would emphasize the birth of Christ or the resurrection of Christ. Or on October 31st, the celebration of All Saints' Day, all the saints that had passed on to be with the Lord. So in some ways, I think the church was trying to engage in evangelism and apologetics.
Yeah, that's a good reminder, just how we've kind of diverted our attention away from the pagan origins to something that would at the worst be more neutral as opposed to really focusing on
Right.
the occult. Now, that we do definitely see that with regard to some Halloween celebrations. So what advice would you give on how we engage celebrating Halloween without opening up the door to the occult?
Yeah, very important. I think all Christians need to evaluate kind of controversial issues like this. I think the way is look at scripture, to look at good common sense, and to look at your conscience. I mean, I tell parents, look, if you're really uncomfortable with any kind of participation in Halloween, I respect that. I think, however, you also don't want to create what I call a party pooper view of God. I remember, for example, when I was like in third or fourth grade, we would have a Halloween party at the public school that I went to, Christmas parties. And I remember that there were two people in the class that were part of a particular religion, and they had to go sit in the corner. And I remember even as a child, I thought, wow, I'm glad I'm glad I'm not part of that. So if you're uncomfortable with Halloween, maybe a church party or, something that lets your kids understand that God's not against having fun. And, it's pretty hard to resist getting candy bars. You want to communicate that. So those are some of my recommendations. I let my kids go trick-or-treating. They didn't dress up in what I thought were inappropriate outfits, but they dressed up in fun, and I'll tell you, all three of my kids, right after Christmas, Halloween was their favorite holiday.
Yeah, and you know what? That's actually the what the numbers show too, as far as sales and the money that comes in.
Yeah,
from different holidays. Halloween is right on the heels of Christmas. People spend a lot of money on Halloween, and you know what? It really is a good opportunity to, of course, we have COVID now that we have to think about.
Sure.
But under normal circumstances, that's such a great opportunity to have people who you wouldn't normally engage with, have them on your church campus, or have them in your, a front yard party or something.
Yeah.
Again, I like what you're saying, that it's not to say that people have to celebrate something that they're uncomfortable with, but really to kind of dive into thinking about it and being careful how we think about it, and not tying it to things that it's kind of evolved away.
And dark images have been used in literature. I mean, two of my favorite authors, Lewis and Tolkien, they use kind of dark images, but they use them to project a Christian view of reality. So, you want to be respectful of other people's views, but you also want to be able to appreciate that not every Christian's going to come to the same conclusion.
Right. Thank you so much for that conversation. So if you want to hear more on this topic, go to reasons.org and search for the tricky topic of Halloween. And before we go, Ken, I've got a very important question for you. What's your favorite Halloween candy?
It's got to be, there's something absolutely delightful about chocolate and peanut butter coming together. So it's got to be a Reese's peanut butter cup.
Good choice there. Well, there you have it.
Now it's time for RTB 101, where we discuss practical questions to equip you to share your faith more effectively. And here to help me talk about a very provocative question is one of our visiting scholars at Reasons to Believe, Mr. Mark Perez. Welcome back, Mark.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Now, I know that you contributed a chapter to our recent book, Thinking About Evolution. Maybe you can tell our viewers a little bit more about the purpose of your chapter and kind of your unique contribution to the book.
Sure. Since the book was really designed to help people understand different questions about the theory of macroevolution, or at least one of theories, it was important for me to see that, to recognize that, to help people recognize that when you're looking at these kinds of very important questions, there are times when errors in reasoning will occur. And if you know what those errors in reasoning are, you can identify them, you can help eliminate them and clarify some of the points that will actually mislead you. So it actually looks at how can we avoid the fallacies that mislead us into problems that actually lead us to things other than what's true.
Very good. And the idea of fallacies might be new for some of our viewers. You briefly alluded to it there as an error in thinking. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that, expand that idea a bit.
Sure. A fallacy is an error in reasoning that does not look like a mistake in reasoning. And it often goes by really quickly. People will hear it and then not recognize it. And that becomes the problem. Is if you deduce something or you make a claim that's fallacious and you use a mistake in reasoning, you can't rely on that reasoning for the conclusion. So it's important to ferret that out and to recognize that that is a fallacy, a mistake in reasoning that will lead you to the wrong conclusion or doesn't justify the conclusion that you've made.
So the fallacy that we're going to look a little bit more in detail in is kind of what I think it's called the false dilemma fallacy, or maybe the either or fallacy. Maybe you can talk to us in particular about that mistake in thinking.
Yes, it's pretty obvious in some cases that you have a false dilemma. So a faulty dilemma, the either or fallacy, depending on how you want to look at it, can occur in something as simple as a parent talking to a child. So the parent says, either you go to college or you're going to be worthless. Well, is it really either one or the other, or is there something else in there too? So that particular argument is a faulty dilemma, that it's either this or that. And so when you have things that are in question in the evolution creation debate, you can end up with some either or problems there too.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because this kind of false dilemma, it sometimes it overlooks a third option. Well, maybe there's another possibility available. How do we see this fallacy show up in the creation evolution controversy?
It shows up, first of all, because the two sides aren't necessarily the only two sides involved. So one of the first things, if you say it's creation versus evolution, which version of evolution are you talking about? Which version of creation theory are you talking about? Mm-hmm. And then if you're going to juxtapose just two of them, then the question is it either one or the other, or is it really a third option? Is it possible that there are some aspects of creation theory that can fit in with evolution theory? Or is it possible that some features of evolution theory will fit in with creation theory? And that you can end up with some kind of hybrid or some kind of third option that is different from either one of the two as exclusives. So that faulty dilemma can end up preventing us from looking for other options. It's a fallacy because there are so many possible options. And we don't want to use that fallacy to restrict ourselves. We want to open ourselves up to the possibility that the truth may be somewhere other than the two ends that we often see juxtaposed.
That's really important, because you're raising the issue that there are actually multiple definitions of evolution that can be in play. And there's also different understandings and definitions of creation. So there might be, another option available or some hybrid of options. So when we find ourselves in those discussions, rather than falling into the false dilemma trap, it sounds like we really need to have some clarifying conversations. Well, how are you defining these terms? And then to explore what are some other possibilities that might be available. All of that kind of assumes that we stay somewhat dispassionate in the conversation, wouldn't you say?
I would say that dispassionate would be ideal, but even if you're not dispassionate, even if you are very passionate, the thing you should be most passionate about is the truth. And if the truth is somewhere other than the two sides that are proposed, we got to go there.
Very good. Well, thank you, Mark. And I want to once again let everyone know to look for Mark's chapter in the new book from RTB Press, Thinking About Evolution, co-authored by Dr. Fuzz Rana, Dr. Anjanette Roberts, and Dr. Sue Dykes. You can find that book by going to reasons.org.
Hello, Jeff Zwerink here, and welcome back to Give and Take, the segment of our show where we explore important scientific ideas to equip you to be better prepared to share the gospel. Today, I'm joined by founder and president of Reasons to Believe, Dr. Hugh Ross, and we are going to explore Earth's extraordinary water properties. Hugh, it's good to have you here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me on.
You know, Hugh, water is one of these compounds that people have seen have an extraordinary set of properties. It's not like there's a lot of liquids out that have them have the properties that water does. Kind of walk us through some of just the things that are more well known about water that make it particularly fit for a planet that wants to host life.
Well, it's the only solvent that's available in the entire chemical spectrum that allows for the complexity of the carbon bondings that you need to make life possible. Also allows for the stability. I mean, water also has a unique property that it takes a lot of energy to freeze it or to boil it. And so that means liquid water can be reasonably stable. And that's crucial for life.
That's important for being here on Earth, because if it freezed and melted earlier, you'd actually freeze up a lot of your water, and that would be very detrimental to life in the oceans, which is where most life is here on Earth.
Right, right.
So what are some of the other important properties of water that we see here on Earth's surface?
Well, we know we have these water cycles on our planet Earth, and it's really thanks to the fact that water can easily evaporate from oceans and streams, go into the atmosphere, and be able to liquefy there as rain and snow and fall upon the Earth. And that can happen in a very stable way where you don't have the water either accumulating on the Earth or disappearing into outer space. I mean, it's really important for life on planet Earth that we have a stable quantity of water at a just right level. Too much is a problem, too little is a problem, and we see it going away at a faster or slower rate, we also have a problem.
Well, that cycle there also provides a great thermostat for the globe as well, because of the high heat capacity that you mentioned that water has.
Well, that's true. I mean, we all get concerned about hurricanes, but hurricanes actually are a great thermostat. When the water gets too warm, they cool the water down. And so that's important to maintain life in the oceans.
So it seems like there's a lot of information out there about just the remarkable properties of water that we see on Earth's surface. But one of the things that I find fascinating is that you're highlighting some research that shows that the way water behaves down deep inside Earth is also important. So what are some of those properties of Earth of water that affect how the interior of Earth operates?
Yeah, most people are aware of the water cycle that takes place in the surface and the atmosphere. I wrote this article to make the point there's a second water cycle that's equally important. This is the deep water cycle, where we see water on the surface of the Earth being drawn through the crust into the mantle, and then from the mantle back up to the crust and the atmosphere. And if that were not going on, and if we didn't have this special chemistry where water is bonding to olivine to make serpentine, we wouldn't have the plate tectonics. And without the plate tectonics, we wouldn't be able to recycle the nutrients that are crucial for life here on planet Earth.
So let's take a step back there. You mentioned olivine and serpentine. Kind of give us, what are those so that our viewers have a better understanding there?
Well, olivine is a dominant mineral within the mantle of the Earth, that layer between the core and the crust of the Earth. But what happens is when water gets drawn down into the mantle through colliding plates and one plate subducting underneath the other, this brings a certain kind of water into contact with the olivine, which establishes a reaction which produces a serpentine. And the serpentine is this hydrated olivine and operates in such a way as to make the tectonic plates move in just the right way so that we can continue to get continental buildup at the same rate that the continents are being eroded down. and also is crucial in establishing arcs of volcanoes. Volcanoes, as I wrote in the article, are crucial for fertilizing the continental land masses so we continue to grow a great supply of food. And they also play a critical role in compensating for the brightness of the sun, because you actually have water being drawn into the earth. And as that happens, it's pulling carbon dioxide down with it. And the drawdown of carbon dioxide into the deep mantle, upper and lower mantle of the earth, actually allows the greenhouse gases in Earth's atmosphere to be drawn down at precisely the just right rate that the sun is getting brighter and brighter. And that explains why we've been able to have life on planet Earth in abundance for 3.8 billion years.
So if I can recap what you're saying, we've got a lot of evidence that water is just remarkable, and how the oceans, how the continents, how the water rivers, the water cycle on the surface of the earth flows. But there's also water being drawn into the earth, and it interacts with the minerals to facilitate plate tectonics, which build up continents as the water wears them down. But it also does it in a way that makes sure that the continents are built at the same rate they're being torn down, and it impacts the atmosphere so that the greenhouse heating is compensated properly because the sun's getting brighter. So you've got the surface effects, you've got the tectonic activity, and you've got the compensation for the atmosphere, all of this playing with these two different, the surface and the subsurface water cycle. Is that correct?
That's all correct. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's actually much more going on that makes possible our advanced life, like this cycling of the minerals so that we can sustain our civilization.
It's really remarkable. And I appreciate your comments, Hugh. We think of water as being a run-of-the-mill ordinary thing because it's just everywhere on Earth. But the more we investigate it, the more we see just how remarkably designed it is to host life, not just here on Earth, but probably anywhere in the universe. I would encourage you to go to reasons.org and check out Hugh's blog on this topic. It's titled, Earth's Deep Water Cycle is Designed for Life. You'll get some great tools that allow you to go out and share just how remarkably designed Earth is, and particularly Earth's water is, so that we can be here, how that points to a creator, and how you can help other people know the creator who made us so that we can know him.
That does it for us this week on 2019. We hope you enjoyed this episode and that it helped equip you to share your faith with confidence and compassion, and give out lots of candy on Halloween.
Well, distanced, but
Maybe
be careful.
throw it out to people.
Something like that. All right. Well, you know what? You can find us on social media. Let us know what you're doing for Halloween. You can find us at 2819 Show. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and we'd love to hear from you.
And if you want the podcast version of the show, you can get it on most major podcast services. Just search Reasons to Believe podcast.
See you next week.
Bye.